There can be no middle way in dealing with transgenderism. It is all or nothing. If transgenderism is true, if men really can become women, then it's true for everybody of all ages. If transgenderism is false, as it is, then it's false for everybody too. If it is false, then for the good of society, and especially for the good of the poor people who have fallen prey to this confusion, transgenderism must be eradicated from public life entirely.
I want to make this video almost as a sequel to my last video about gender ideology. I guess it's a euphemism for talking about transgenderism, the definition of male and female, man and woman. I stand by everything I said in that video, but I think that was all important context that I needed to say in order to make a few points in this video. Sometimes, even when I don't want to be interested in something, I don't want to give it any attention, I can't help but think over, overcomplicate things, basically. I'm an overthinker. Whether it's practical or not, I like to dissect things down to the absolute most basic elements, almost like programming a computer. But I do actually think that the definition of the word woman is a little bit more ambiguous than the typical Matt Walsh answer. I think that it's possible for there to be an actual scientific medical definition of the word woman that exists alongside a more cultural, contextual meaning of the word woman. Maybe first it'd be better to take up one of my gripes, one of my common pet peeves, as they call it, something that irritates me. There's no reason for it to irritate me, but the word female, when applied to women, in a scientific basis, it perfectly makes sense. Women are female, that's fine, but the problem is that not all women are female, but not all female things are women. Only human adult females are women. So technically when you're saying female, you could be talking about dolphins, you could be talking about sparrows, you could be talking about infant baby human females, you could be talking about elderly women. But there's this certain kind of, YouTube content creator, TikTok, Andrew Tate style influencer who likes to use the word females to describe women, I guess because it sounds more scientific, especially when you're discussing this sort of pop science, evo-psych, behavioural view of the world, where you're saying, oh, well, females are programmed to do this and to do that. And if you wanted to say something really general, like females are more nurturing towards children than males, well, you probably could say that, actually, because it kind of exists across species, especially mammals, right? The female of any mammal species is usually the nurturer of the young. I'm sure you could find a few exceptions, but this often crosses into people who I agree with, who are saying things that are completely accurate, that I like. It still bothers me when they say females, when they're talking about romantic relationships that really only apply to adult women. They're not talking about little children. They're not talking about badgers. They're talking about dating strategies, and the only females you should be dating are women. Adult female humans. But something that trans activists, trans advocates bring up frequently, which I'd really like to just dismiss and not think about, but on mulling it over, against my will, I'm overthinking it, I have to admit that they do actually have a point about the definition of woman and female, where yes, we can all agree that a human woman with XX chromosomes is female, and that is a woman. the fact is that we don't know the chromosomes of every single woman that we meet. And there's certain genetic diseases, like complete androgen insensitivity, that cause genetically male people to present as completely female.
See, we all start out as girls, and then we're differentiated based on our genes. The ovaries develop into testes and drop. But in about 1 in 150,000 pregnancies, a fetus with an XY chromosome, a boy, develops into something else. Like you. Your testes never descended because you're immune to testosterone. You're pure estrogen.
And they could live for quite a lot of their life without ever knowing that they are male, because we don't actually have access to the information of somebody's genetics. When we start calling someone she and her and talking about someone as if they're a woman, or talking to them as if they're a woman, the cultural practices that apply, chivalry and politeness, but we adjust our behaviours slightly when we think that we're interacting with a woman or a female. And what we're looking for when we make that decision in our head without even really thinking about it, we are looking at the person and judging them by what they look like. And it happens on such a deep level because it's something that has been important to human society, human psychology, for longer than we've had tool use, And what your brain is looking for when you're deciding how to treat a person, whether to treat them as a male or a female, is you're looking for signs that their body has been exposed to female hormones. Or to be even more precise than that, you're looking for signs that this person that you're interacting with, you're talking to, has not undergone male puberty, which is a far more externally transformative process than female puberty. And there's a lot of things that happen to women. I'm not trying to underplay female puberty. It's an atomic bomb. It does a lot to a woman. But if you look at the difference between women before and after puberty, for men, they get much bigger physically. Their voice gets much deeper. And I think voice and facial features is actually one of the screaming signals that our brain looks for, that we use to detect whether someone is male or female, is listening to their voice and looking at their face. And even things like your posture, the way you stand, the way you walk, these are all clues that your brain is picking up on to determine whether it's seeing a male or a female. But I think the voice and the face are the biggest signals that will override the other things if there's any kind of ambiguity. Oh, hi. Didn't see you there. This must be the part of the video where I tell you about today's sponsor, me. As well as being a YouTuber, I'm also an illustrator, and you can commission an illustration from me for as little as £12. To see what I've been working on, you can follow me on Instagram, and there's a link to that page in the description of this video. Let's get back to the video now, where I'm sure I'm about to say something really interesting. There are those people who say, well, I can always tell. There's no tricking me. I know when I'm looking at a man or a woman. And it's true that in most cases that probably is the case, but it's also it's a logical fallacy to believe that every time you've detected a transgender person or a drag queen, that represents every time you've ever looked at a male dressed as a female, because all the ones that went undetected, you're not counting all of those because you don't know how many times that has happened to you. You're not taking that base rate into account. You have no knowledge of that base rate. You only have knowledge of the detectable toupees. But what I think is becoming much more common is the opposite phenomenon, where women are able to artificially stimulate male puberty in themselves to become more male. And what you get is actually a very convincing simulation of a male person, because a lot of what that XY chromosome is doing in your body is coding for hormones. And if you can replace those hormones with artificial hormones, you can, over a few years, can pretty comprehensively simulate just male puberty. So even though the voice deepens, it changes the kind of skeletal structure and the skin and the facial features. Once those facial features and the voice have undergone testosterone in many cases, the illusion of maleness is very convincing. If you watched my last video, I hope you'll understand that I'm not endorsing this procedure, these hormone treatments or surgeries or anything like that. I'm not absolutely convinced that it's damaging to do this in every single case. I think it's been conclusively proven that in some cases it ends up being a mistake and a big regret for that person. But regardless, go back and watch my last video if you want to understand my position about that. But I think there's no denying the efficacy of the treatment, especially in the case of female to male. So coming back to that question, what is a woman? I think it then becomes very difficult to call this person who has effectively gone through artificial male puberty and now is giving off all of the signals of maleness, absent perhaps the height that a male has. Someone who appears to be, for all intents and purposes, a slightly short, maybe a slightly short man with a slightly strange vocal range. It's easy for me to say that that person is female, medically, but it is actually quite hard for me to convince myself that that person is still a woman. It seems at the very least that this is some kind of edge case.
While I was watching this back and editing it, I realized that there's going to be a lot of people who want to comment on this video, or people who are just thinking that it's just a mistake when socially you don't correctly identify the biological sex of the person you're talking to, that you simply made a mistake, and that's not a real form of knowledge, that's not real access to the universe. There's a mismatch between what's happening in your brain as the perceiver and what's happening in reality, like what has actually happened. Like, you've just made a mistake. And I believe, yes, that is true. That's exactly what I would be thinking if I was watching the video that you're watching, which in fact I am because I'm editing it. But maybe a better way to say it is that to be recognized as a man, let's say, to be recognized as a man is a very masculine trait, in the sense that the vast majority of people who are perceived of as male, that perception is a trait of masculinity. The fact that people are perceiving this person as male and treating them as male is a very masculine trait. In addition to all of the other masculine traits that this person would necessarily need to have in order to elicit that reaction, your identity, in contrast to what a lot of people these days think, a lot of the trans activists think, your identity is not something that you get to decide for yourself. Or I should say, it's not just something that you get to decide and build yourself. Your identity is a combination of your own sense of self and everyone who you've met, who's interacted with you, everyone who knows you or who's seen you. They all have an opinion of you, they all have a perception of you, and all of those combined opinions and judgments, those all go into something that we can call your identity. So while someone saying I am a man or I am a woman is it's not absolutely nothing, but it does very little to change the perception the world has of that person. But when almost everyone who meets that person has a similar opinion of their identity as that person's self-identity, then that counts for something. That's all I'm saying. I'm not saying it changes the biological reality or it changes the nature of the universe. I'm just saying that there is something happening there, And if in the case of someone calling themselves a man whose genetic material doesn't match that description, in that case, the fact that everyone who meets them also thinks that they're a man, if they don't know any differently, that does count for something. It's not nothing. It's not just a mistake. It is now part of that person's identity in some sense.
In a purely social context, where I'm not this person's doctor, I'm not this person's lawyer or any kind of legal professional. You know, I'm purely trying to be friends with this person or just interact with them on a basic level. It doesn't really matter if they are male or female in their actual biology, if the illusion of their maleness or femaleness is convincing enough to convince my brain, I don't have access to that true information. That true identity is a secret to me, and it always will be. And it's simply not relevant. It's not relevant to the situation, the fact that this person is born male or this person was born female. And what I'm hoping for is that adding together the whole of what I said in my last video with everything I've said in this video, then you can understand why my personal opinion is that in order to win this battle of the culture war, we don't have to completely annihilate the idea of transgenderism. We don't have to accept it and believe it either, but I don't believe that the win state of the culture, of the society, I don't think that should include being transgender being completely illegal or cross-dressing or whatever it may be. Just for the record, because I know someone in the comments is going to say it, I have more testosterone than the average female, which is why some people online speculate that I'm trans or that I'm a man. I'm not. In real life, I'm actually quite short, and I'm pregnant right now. But on the screen, I know I kind of look big boned, and I have kind of a deep voice and male interests, and lots of reasons why people are able to see that I've got higher testosterone than most women, which also results in my hair getting really greasy really quickly. But yeah, I'm female. Anyway, thanks very much for watching, and I'll see you again in the next video.